Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do something unique, which is rebuild an ABS pump for a 1991 to 1995 Acura Legend. Now, this is a common problem within the Acura Legend community, so we're going to tackle it ourselves by rebuilding one and installing it back into the car. I hope you like this content. It's a bit unique, but let's get back to the action. Okay, here we have a 1992 Acura Legend ABS pump. This ABS pump is the full unit, so let's do a quick orientation to this part. We have the motor down here connected by 3 Phillips head screws. Most of your 1-2s will be related to this pump being seized. You can sometimes have the diaphragm in this component right here, which I believe is the accumulator, go out. So this repair will not go into that. If you have this failure, you'll have to find a new one. You have a hose that goes from down to your pump from your reservoir up here, and your modulator, I believe. I could be wrong. This could be the modulator, and that could be the accumulator. But you have a seal here and here that needs to be replaced. This is common for it to leak here. You have internal components. You have a seal leak that can happen from here. So what you want to do is first drain out all the fluid. So let's take a second to talk about the seals that are going to fail in the ABS pump. So first set of seals are external seals, and I have them highlighted here on the diagram. They're called sealing washers, and they go to in pairs, connecting to the modulator down to the pump. And so these are two metal washers on both sides of the hose that need to be replaced regardless of what you're doing. Um, so there's two at the top and there's two at the bottom. These should be replaced regardless, but this is a common failure point to why you'll get a pump failure. So if we turn our attention to the internal seals for just a moment, there are two sets of pistons. You have your rear pistons and your front pistons. The arrows in this diagram are pointing to a singular front piston with two O-rings attached to them. The two O-rings have varying sizes, which we'll go into later, but both of these piston O-rings could be replaced and should be replaced. So you have two modulator heads, uh, which contain two pistons each, for two for the front and two for the rear. Each modulator head has two O-rings that have to be replaced as well. So in total, you have 4 modulator head O-rings, and you have 8 total piston rings that need to be replaced. And this is a common failure point internally to the pump. The modulator head O-rings can fail, causing external fluid leak. The last common failure point for the ABS pump that causes the pump to fail is the 3 O-rings that attach to the reservoir. So your reservoir is what holds your fluid. It sits on top of the modulator and has 3 um, output holes, if you will, and each of these holes has an O-ring, and we'll see this later on in the video. But these 3 need to be replaced, and is a common source for the fluid to leak out over time and cause the pump to fail. So let's take a look at the O-rings here. So we have all the O-rings listed here, and I just want to make sure that I call out that the material that needs to be used is EPDM. EPDM is a brake fluid resistant um, rubber material that these O-rings need to be made up of for them to resist the brake fluid and have longevity when you're resealing an ABS pump. So you can't get these O-rings at any hardware store or Harbor Freight or automotive store. They have to typically be special ordered. So starting with the first O-ring here is a 2 millimeter, which refers to the thickness of the O-ring by 31 millimeter, which refers to the diameter of the O-ring. You'll need 4 of these. 4 of these are used for the 2 modulator heads. So if you were to only remove 1 modulator head, you would only need 2 of these, but to do a complete service, you'll need 4. The next O-ring is a 1.5 millimeter by 26 millimeter, and this will go on the top of each piston. And the next O-ring will go on the bottom of each piston, which is a 1.5 millimeter by 25 millimeter O-ring. The next O-ring on the list, a 1.5 by 10.5 millimeter O-ring, is used to reseal the 3 orifices below the reservoir, so the ones that we looked at in the diagram previously. The last O-ring is a 2 millimeter by 10 millimeter O-ring, which is a thicker, stout O-ring. This is used for the accumulator ball that is directly above the pump in the video that you'll see. So you'll have to unscrew that accumulator ball and remove that O-ring. We didn't talk about this because it's not a common failure, but if you're going to go ahead and take the pump out and service it, it might as well be replaced while you're in there. I can work on it. It's a little flexible, but not too bad. I've already tested the motor on this. The motor was kind of stuck, but that's been freed. So one of the biggest issues is that the system leaks either from one of these fittings or internally, and then it leaks out fluid, and then the motor just runs and runs until it burns itself out. So if you open this up and you've got a bunch of charred or very dark black coil, it should look like copper coil in there, like fresh copper. And if it looks black, then you know that your pump motor itself is fried, and you'll have to source a new motor. This one. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't show you what a burnt motor looked like. So here's an example of another ABS motor that is actually the factory original motor from the car. The car was throwing a 1-2 code, which is a circulator pump failure. And this is exactly what I was talking about, where it looks like it's charred. You can see here at the bottom, 6 o'clock reference of the pump. It's extremely dark. You can see actually a coil has broke here, and in overall condition, this is not savable. And so if your pump looks similar to this, then you'll have to source a new pump, and there's nothing that you can really do to rebuild or save this. You could attempt to run it, and perhaps it will run for a period of time, but ultimately it will have a reduced life and should be replaced. Source a new motor. This one I tested and it's good, like I said. So now we can tear it down, and we'll go into kind of how each piece of this takes apart. So we've got some bolts up here. Internally, there's some screws that hold this on, or sorry, screws that hold this part on. And then this threads on with a wrench right here if you want to take that apart. There's a gasket that keeps debris out of the motor right here, and then there's crush washers. So what we're going to do is do a complete teardown, and instead of like showing you piece by piece live, I'll take it apart because I haven't done this before, and then we'll talk about it as we go. Okay, so we've got the first piece off, which is the reservoir, and you can see it's connected by 2 screws here and here. We've got 3 kind of inlets, if you will, for fluid to go down in, and then we have a hose that connects down into the pump area. And so this is what it looks like. Here's your 2 screws that are right here. This will need to get cleaned out, and here's your hose. I just released the lower clamp and then used this as the final drain for the rest of the fluid. One of the issues that I'm aware of with this pump is that the brake fluid becomes crystallized, and that's what gums up the pump. It physically stops it because of the gumming. As you can see here, we've got some seals right around
these guys. And I'm going to take a quick second to talk about the seals. So you want to use EPDM seals. And why you want to use EPDM seals is because they are brake fluid resistant. And that will allow those seals to last longer. If you use regular like nitrile seals, or you use any type of other rubber seal, they're not going to hold up over time. But you can see that these seals are really flattened. And then once you replace those seals, so I have a seal kit over here, a bunch of different seals. We'll see how this pans out. Hopefully we've got the right seals. You want to put a little bit of lubricant on them, and specifically lubricant that is for EPDM. And I looked up this silicone ceramic extreme by Permatex. You can get this at most hardware stores. Half an ounce, a little bit will do you. Costs about $5. But this is what you want to kind of coat, light coating on these rubber seals. This will allow them to sit right, but will also allow them to maintain over the years. And I've got like a dentist kit here I picked up from Harbor Freight, real cheap, couple bucks, and we're going to use these to as a pick to remove these seals. Otherwise you'll have a hard time. So a couple little tools and tricks of the trade. You want a flare wrench right here, 10mm flare wrench. You'll want to have a torque wrench. You'll want to have some socket sizes. You want to have miscellaneous, a really nice screwdriver. This screwdriver worked perfectly because these will round out. And the other thing is you're going to need some miscellaneous seal washers, metric size for this right here, I believe. We'll see when we get to them, but I believe those are crush washers. So that's our first piece right there. Okay, the next layer down here is this plate, and this plate doesn't need to necessarily come off, but I took it off anyways, and then I wet sanded both sides of it just to get the corrosion off. But I want to show you something here. So we have 3 screens, and if you take a look at the right one there, you can kind of see what the issue is. It's caked up with rust. The other 2 I was able to clean out using some brake cleaner. This one though, however, looks like it's rusted, and I haven't been able to get these out. As you can see here, I kind of gouged my finger trying to do so. But just take note that if these screens are obstructed, that could be a partial issue. So take some time and kind of clean these out would be my recommendation. It couldn't hurt.
Okay, one of the things I failed to put on video is the modulator caps. So each modulator cap has 3 bolts. The two bolts are 12mm, and the other bolt is a 14mm. These have to come off, and then the modulator pistons can be removed.
Okay, and here's the next step. So we've got the cover off here. You can see the other cover still on this one. You've got 2 springs. Take note of the color difference here, left and right. We've got 2 seals here. And I want to just zoom in real quick, or come in real quick. Show you, look at the crystallization here. All this crystallization is what gums up the pump. And so we've got more crystallization here as well. So we're going to take the spring off of here. We're going to do one side at a time, obviously, so that we don't confuse the springs and everything. And it will leak as you're doing this. So looks like this side's a little stuck, but we'll get this freed up here. Okay, the next piece is you got to take this out. This is basically your cylinder that has 2 seals on it, as you can see here, upper and lower seal, and then you've got this bottom part here. These seals have to be replaced, and how you do that is you take a flathead screwdriver and pry just ever so slightly. Don't put a lot of force, but on this upper plate right here, just like this, and then just slightly pull up on it, and it should start to come. See? There you go, just like that. And since this one's so caked on, I won't do it off camera, but you saw how it moved. It was flush, and then it went boop. and you just need to keep on doing that to get that to come up. Might need to position it a couple different ways to get that to come up, but that's the gist of it. You can see here that we have a bunch of crystallization right here. That's old brake fluid. So that old brake fluid right there needs to come out. We need to clean up all this and then put new seals around this and then reinstall. So once you remove these, you gotta look down in the barrel. There's usually a bunch of debris in there. As you can see, I've cleaned this one out pretty well, but the crystallization goes all the way down into there, and you want to make sure that you get all of that out. So you're starting with a clean, fresh um, uh, spot to reinsert this. And this, you want to make sure that this is clean too. It gets crystallized around where the seals sit, as well as the bottom. This moves in and out, as you can see, so you want to make sure that all that crystallization and buildup is taken care of. And then put new seals on it. Um, and that's pretty much it for this side. So we got to reassemble this and then put this back down. You know, I use some shop air just to blow this out and get all the junk out of there, as well as push some of the fluid. So the fluid travels from this side over to this side and then out through this hole right here. These are you can see that they're marked front right, right left, or rear left, sorry, and then rear right, and then front left. But the fluid travels from this over to here, so logically you'd want to start from this side and then push all your debris over into this chamber and out this hole, is what I'm thinking.
After referencing the shop manual, it appears that I forgot to capture something in the video, which is once you clean up the cylinder holes, you want to put clean brake fluid at the bottom of it and then pump the cylinder, which is the top part with the metal ring and the nut, about 5 times. That'll help push the brake fluid up into the cylinder and expel some air before you actually go do the bleeding.
Okay, when you have everything all cleaned up and ready to go back together, you got to put new seals here and then clean these springs up, which I'm just noticing there's a little bit of debris there. And then this sits back on top. Let's see if we get this lined up here. There we go. And then you would, torque this down. I'll put all the torque specifications in like kind of a picture diagram at the end. But make sure you just lube all of these seals. You want to make sure you get a nice good seal here and clean up your surface area. Once again, I kind of just wet sanded this down to break down some of the corrosion touch points on that. And then you're pretty much good to go. So we've got everything taken off of the bracket here because we're going to sand this down and paint it and make it look good. 14 millimeter 3 on the bottom of this hold this unit onto the top here, as you can see, 1, 2, 3. There are some bushings that go to this bracket right here that mount underneath, which hold that unit on. But what I wanted to show is that here's a good example of a good motor. You can see this one still has plenty of copper that's not burnt. The little bushings down here that create the energy are good. This is the accumulator, so we'll take this off and replace the seal that's down underneath here. The crush washers here, let's take a look here. So we've got 4, you'll need 4 of these that go on to those bolts. I happen to have a kind of kit here, if you will. So let's see if we can match this up real quick. And some of the bits are all over the place. That looks like a pretty good match right there, I would say. And so that is going to be probably an M6 from the looks of it. Or maybe an M8, actually. Some of the bits have gone around. Let's take a look here. Yeah, I'm going to go with an M8 and see how that works. It looks pretty good and close. Okay, so the next thing is we're going to take this apart. We're going to take a look at the accumulation inside the motor, because what the motor does is it goes down into a cylinder, which then spins, and then fluid then goes into that. So we want to take a look and see if there's any crystallization there. So I went ahead and took the motor base apart, and inside was just caked full of rust and debris in here. It's just nasty. So there is an O-ring here, and I don't happen to have this O-ring, so we gotta preserve this as best we can. And you can see here's some more good example of what's going on in the motor. As you can imagine, as this spins around and it builds up, it's going to eventually just lock up. So we want to clean all of this out. You actually have to go a lot further. You have to take this screen out. This screen is obviously designed to protect the motor and its internal workings. So you got to clean this out. Okay, the last little bit here is to take the accumulator off. You'll need an open-end wrench. It's 19 millimeters to get enough torque on it. So you're going to pull down on it, and once you do that, you can replace the one last O-ring that's in there. And then you should torque it back to spec, but unfortunately, you can't really do that with an open-end wrench too well. So now this is ready to go back together. I have a vise gripped here so that, or clamped in with the vise so that you can get enough torque on that. That's another thing I wanted to note real quick, because it is a little bit of a pain to do that. So you really do have to take this fully apart and individualize your service points with each piece. So you want to take that apart, then this apart, servicing everything completely, and then piece everything back together. I did it one by one. So there you are. After you're done, it should pretty much spin freely, just like this. So the difference being is when I first took this apart, which I didn't video, it was actually stuck, and I thought that was odd, but not too abnormal, since sometimes motors have such a high resistance to them that they actually need electricity to spin. But this one does not, clearly, because it spins just fine. It spins actually quite freely. Now, it took quite a bit of force to break it, which proves that these pumps just accumulate a bunch of crap in them, and then they try and try and try to keep on spinning, but they can't, so they fry out. Luckily, this one was salvageable. One quick note right here, so these little things have to be um, you know, re-engaged, so they're sitting on a set point right here, and I just take my little pick and then release them. So you got to go around and do all of that. That's one quick way, and make sure that you hold on to the springs that are behind here. I basically cleaned up the edges here so we could get a nice good mating surface for the gasket going back together. I cleaned up some of the other pieces here. You can see that like this is nice and shiny now because I cleaned it up. So pretty much done now, and we'll see if it works. Okay, and here we have the finished product. We have the bracket all nice and painted, and we have our pressure line going down into the accumulator and into the pump. And we kind of brightened up this area a little bit. Could probably do a little bit more work on this, but otherwise it's ready to go back in the car and hopefully will work.
So it's just easier for me to put the torque specs at the end of the video and then stop the video and just keep on giving you torque specs for each bolt. But you get the gist of how to rebuild the pump at this point, and I would highly recommend that you use these torque specs to avoid any seal failure in the near future. One thing I didn't go into the video, which is bleeding the ABS system. What you want to do is reinstall the pump and bleed the ABS system so that it draws fluid in there. You're going to get aerated fluid for the first couple times that you attempt to bleed the pump. Now, there's a couple videos out on YouTube that you can use to reference how to do this. I'm not going to go into that in this video. This is strictly about rebuilding the pump. But if you don't feel comfortable enough removing the pump and you don't feel comfortable enough bleeding the pump, then you probably don't feel comfortable enough rebuilding the pump.